What's up, Mr. Young?
I just thought it right.
About my jacket?
No,
Right. Okay, I think we'll get started because yeah, it's past half past. There are no some specific notes with this today. I can print off copies of the slides if people are interested, but it's not one that's taken directly from the walkthroughs. You've all got access to the walkthrough material, and there are some things about dual coding. They're quite specific and narrow, so I think today I'm going to try and do a broad discussion and explanation of dual coding, certainly how I understand it, and then we can have a think about how that might work in your practice. Not that I need an excuse to put on the sparkly jacket, but I was looking for one and I thought there's possibly a connection between dual coding and this, how I look. Basically, dual coding is about improving explanation and student understanding through both auditory learning and explanation and the use of images. Right? So I thought, you may be more likely to remember this because you're identifying the image, the sparkly jacket, with the words that I'm saying, maybe more effective than had I been in my classic Marks and Spencer's off grey suit instead. Right, that's it. Yeah, so that's a basic outline of the theory, that when we are processing information through visual and verbal and auditory processing, that people are more likely to make links and connections between those things, and therefore, as a result, that information is more likely to stick in a student's long-term memory. And essentially, that's what we want, and that learning to have taken place, it needs to move from the working memory, where it's easily lost, into long-term memory. And a lot of the things we talk about in these sessions are based on that. So we're trying to improve learning and establish things in kids' long-term memories. Okay, so retrieval practice is all about that, the different ways you can do it. And this is simply another method to try and improve that. Okay, again, in previous sessions we've talked about what working memory is, what long-term memory is. So the short-term working memory that you're using all the time, but for something to be properly learnt, for kids to be able to recall it under exam conditions, it needs to be stored in that long-term memory. They need to have that knowledge. Okay. There's a sense that your long-term memory, working memory can only store a short number of things at a time. So it's all about trying to, develop it into the long-term memory. This is also connected to the concept of cognitive load, which we've talked about as well, which Dylan William sees as one of the most important things for teachers to be conscious of, that we're not overloading the working memory at any time, and that you're giving kids the opportunity to think about stuff in class and to process it, and therefore have it in their long-term memory, and not moving on too much or overloading people with content or detail. I'm conscious I might be doing that at the minute now, but I'm trying to I'm conscious of this myself as well. In my own sort of presentation of work, trying to strip back the content of the slides, minimize the text, using images on slides, and trying to have things bigger. That's probably more than enough information on one slide to be presenting to young people. Okay, there's probably too much on this one. So I was doing this again. Okay, but dual coding is a way of reducing the written content or the teacher talking content, and trying to engage those two parts of the mind together to really store things in the long-term memory. And I think there's loads of different ways this can be done. I think if we looked at the walkthroughs program, it talks about using a diagram to try and make a concept really clear to people, and that might be something that's applicable to your subject. It should be something that you're trying to think about and use with your PowerPoints, your presentations as well. You have some sort of image that is connected to the information you're trying to get across. I picked up a couple of examples of things I'm trying to do in my class lab this week. So they are looking at, this is the excitement of higher politics, they are looking at the key features of the UK Constitution and comparing them to the American Constitution. And I try to, in the notes that I give them in the PowerPoints, just use the same icons every time. So I've got just basic one for America, the points of analysis, and the different things to do with the constitutions. So any tasks they were doing, any PowerPoint presentations, this final task where they're bringing things together and adding it to this, the same icons, the same images were used consistently. I don't do that all the time, but I'm trying to sort of build that in when I'm adapting PowerPoints and I'm adapting resources to use consistent images and icons. So there was that. That's one way that you can use it. I've also got a lot of information I need them to sort of access and process, and again, conscious of that cognitive overload, I often get them to convert quite a bit of written text into something that is images and small number of words. I give them five words for four different stages of a bill becoming a law. So the Queen's speech, King's speech, and the different ways that something becomes a law. And again, that's quite difficult for them to get their heads around. So it was reading the information they needed and then working in pairs to decide how they were going to convert that into images and no more than 5 words per stage. And then again, doing something with that, then taking that with another pair and explaining their images and diagrams. So they're engaging with the image, they're thinking about the written text, and that way it's trying to make those connections in the long-term memory. So there's 2 things I've done this week that were dual coding that worked for me, but I think there are huge numbers of ways that this could be used. It will obviously depend on subject area. That's really, I suppose, more to do with presentation on a PowerPoint, trying to remove the detail that's not required, keeping the images simple, consistent. I just use Google search and hit icons, so like, if I got icon for analysis and then we might thing up. That was fine, it was good. That's a good way to find stuff.
Okay, let's have a look at the weekend, yeah? Don't do it 11 then.
Okay, so that, I'm not sure if you can see that terribly well. This is maybe an example again of what not to do in a presentation, but there's some written information there, and then people might be asked to answer those questions. And if you're trying to do it that way, just looking at the written text, it's quite not at all. Okay, it's quite difficult to do. Okay. If, however, you convert that information into some sort of visual form, okay, like this, it then becomes a much easier concept to do. And again, something like that might apply to your subject. For us, in politics or modern studies, they have to have a sense of the UK and US political system. And again, if I just give that in written text, it's quite difficult to work out which bit goes with which. Using a visual representation, using map from memory techniques, so they have to go out and recall the information and so on, is much more effective. Okay, so presenting complex information in visual form can be an effective way for students to access it. Mr. Smiley.
Interrupt for a wee second. I know that looks like a really fancy diagram for that. I don't need to produce things like that. It can be just a similar way of organising it. If you just created little boxes on PowerPoint or whatever you were using, if you were hand drawing it, whatever it was, to kind of illustrate it, that just makes it simpler for us to absorb that information than it does the way that it was written before. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're going from that text to that, which is very complex. I think even if it wasn't last thing on a Friday, to the visual representation, which does make it easier. Does make it easier in that case. Okay, so that's my general summary of it. If you're just giving verbal explanation, then that's going to be difficult. If you're just presenting written text for kids to get information, that's going to be difficult. If it's just images, then probably doesn't make much sense either. A combination of both is a much more effective way for people to access explanations, to learn about things, and to have it stored in their long-term memory. One for me as well. I think it is discussed in the walkthrough stuff. I know people have access to that through your collaborative teaching and learning programs. If you're not sure where to access all of that material, speak to one of us and we can show you. There are also these books, but even more accessible and important, Mr. Smiley.
So today's Learning Latest is specifically about geocoding. So the reading part of it this month is a blog that has a post about geocoding, which will give you the right starting place for you to go off and do your own research if you wanted to take it further. The podcast this month as well is also about geocoding, and it's from one of the guys that's part of this, Oliver Cavalioli, who is the big geocoding guy. So he's talking about that on that podcast. It's about an hour long, about 45, 50 minutes.
And he does, I haven't listened to this one, but he does tend to go into quite a lot of detail about it.
He does.
Obviously, that is not necessary for our purposes, and I do think, while this is quite a broad approach, there are so many different things and techniques you could use that apply these basic principles, but I think it's just about thinking about the basic principle in general and how you can bring that into your own practice. So I think that for the last 15 minutes, sorry, Kieran.
Sorry, what I was going to say about access to that, the link should be accessible with anybody with a Glow account. So if there's someone in your department who's a student, if you could share the link to Learning Latest with them, they should be able to access it. If there's any issues with that, you can contact me or just email the pedagogy team and we'll update the access so that people can get use of those resources and those materials that are there. Okay.
So I think, just for the last 10 to 15 minutes, I think people are mostly in departments, so it might be worthwhile just initially having a conversation with people from within your department. How could it be used then? But then maybe sharing that with somebody else, because it will be different in application, I think, depending on the subject that you teach. Thank you very much, Amy. Thank you. It's really over to you to discuss how it might be best used in your own practice.
Or even like if you've got a lesson that you've maybe created something for and you think actually it might be worthwhile me going back and having a look at 2 of those slides and saying, could I strip the slides back? Could I put in an icon that's going to make the text and the images work alongside each other? Or is there something I could do to make that more accessible for people? It's up to you, really.